Hey everybody, it's Kathy with Backyard Columbus, and today's episode is called What Do Your Flowers Tell You? So what this episode is not is a hippy-dippy episode encouraging you to go out and talk to your flowers, because that is totally not what I'm saying. And in my defense, I do not go out and talk to my flowers either. I do go admire them, but I don't talk to them. What it is about is, if you were to walk outside right now, whether it's your porch, your patio, or your yard, and you were to look around at your flowers, they're telling you something. And if you are not seeing bees, butterflies, and believe it or not, flies or pollinators also, if you do not see all these little winged things on your flowers, then you kind of have the wrong flowers. So listen, there are lots of flower choices when you go to the nursery. You have native ones and non-native ones, exotic ones, local ones, typically not invasive. And I've talked about this before, but if this is your very first episode you're listening to, then I will give you a brief rundown. A native flower is something, in my words, okay, I could give you the technical definition, but I didn't look it up again. It is a flower or a plant, whatever, that is native to the area in which you find it. So an echinacea, a purple coneflower, is native to Ohio, among many other places. And that just means that for millennia, it has always grown in Ohio. It knows the requirements for Ohio, the water, the sun. It already knows that that's the deal, and it thrives, okay? Versus exotic. An exotic flower is something that came from somewhere else, but it's not going to cause damage to our ecosystem, okay? So think Asiatic lilies. Asiatic lilies have not taken over the Ohio landscape, so they're not doing any harm like an invasive is. Invasive would definitely be honeysuckle, the Amur honeysuckle. That is a terrible, nasty thing. Look, I loved sucking on those little, whatever the pieces were out of the flower when I was a little kid, but now I just see them as like the bane of everyone's existence. So you have native, which is great, exotic, which is tolerable, invasive, which is terrible. So the native flowers almost always will host the local wildlife, and I'm talking about the bees, butterflies, moths, flies, everyone who pollinates. Exotic, not so much. Almost never. Listen, I am not a botanist. I'm not a horticulturalist. So I am kind of like your general idea guy. So in general, the exotic flowers do not provide the nutrition that local pollinators need. And so in case you did not know this, and this is your first episode, pollinators, bees, butterflies, things like that, they need to eat. And bees need the nectar and pollen, mostly pollen, and butterflies need the nectar. And something like a rose doesn't provide that. So a quick rundown here, just in general. This is what the problem is I see, because during each season, these are the things that folks are buying because they just don't know. They're pretty, but they're like, flowers, yay. And then if they thought maybe a step further, they're like, ooh, I'll get some flowers because then I can attract butterflies and pollinators and I'll be doing a good job, without realizing the whole deal. So things like in the spring, tulips and daffodils. Now look, if you have tulips and daffodils and spring ephemerals. So spring ephemerals is a new term to myself included. I just learned about this a couple of years ago. A spring ephemeral is a little flower that grows in the woodlands of Ohio, well, probably across the country, but I'm based in Ohio. So it grows in the woods and it only lasts during the spring, and it dies back and it goes dormant for the rest of the year, and it comes back in the spring. Those are great pollinator attracting flowers. Crocus, I just learned a couple of years ago, the middle stems of the crocus actually is providing pollen for mason bees, and mason bees are stingless bees that appear in the very early spring. And I'm assuming they have some version of a mason bee across the country, but here in Ohio, we have a little tiny mason bee, doesn't do any harm, but they need something to eat. So point is, if we just talk about the spring, if all you have are tulips and daffodils, then those little mason bees don't have anything to eat, okay? So if you add crocus, or you had spring ephemerals that will pop up all throughout the spring, early, mid, and late spring, then you will be doing the local pollinators some good. And go ahead and grow the pretty daffodils that you like, but just understand that daffodils are actually, tulips. Go ahead and get any tulips that you like, and daffodils for that matter. Any tulips and daffodils that you like, but understand that they are not feeding the local wildlife. So if you do both, then you have it covered. Roses, hydrangeas, mums, petunias, and begonias. Those are all very typical things that people would go out to the nurseries and buy. They are all sterile. What they do in their native habitat, I have no idea. But here in Ohio, they don't feed anything. So if you are a begonia girl, a begonia guy, a begonia person, and you just love them, then by all means, please plant them and enjoy them. But then I would find a local source, like a local native plant flower that you can plant along with that will feed the local wildlife. The OSU Agricultural Extension is a wonderful resource of telling you. They have, I'll put it in the show notes, but they have a PDF. If you were to just look up pollinator list per season OSU Agricultural Extension, I'm sure you will find it, but it will give you everything that you need per season and actually what it attracts, what light requirements it has. It's a fantastic resource. But that way you will be doing some good. And look, you don't have to do all of it. You could just get a couple of pots. Say, hey, I'm going to have a pot of begonias or a pot of mums or a pot of wave petunias. Put those in your window boxes. And then maybe you're going to get a pot or a little landscape area of the native flowers that will actually do some good. So I just happened to notice this the other day. I was at a local grocery store and they had asters and they had mums. And if you have been on my website, if you've listened to a couple of podcasts of mine, you will know that I am a huge fan of asters. Asters are pretty new to me, but in mums, we've all know what mums are, okay? People have mumkins and they have mum sales, and as soon as it's any semblance of fall, mums are out in there for sale. But mums are sterile, and most people don't know that. And again, I didn't know that until a few years ago. You think, yay, flower, I'm going to get all kinds of butterflies, and if you aren't afraid of bees, which you should not be, I'm going to get bees also. But mums don't produce anything. They're sterile. They've been hybridized. What they do in their native habitat, I don't know. But in Ohio, they don't feed anything. So asters, which are actually in the same family, they do everything. There's all kinds of asters, and they feed. If you were to see my yard right now, it's alive with bees and some butterflies going on the asters. But at the grocery store, there were bees all over the asters and nothing was on the mums. So that's what gave me the idea that if you were to go in your yard right now and you were to check out what flowers you have and you don't see anything on them, then I would encourage you to make a few changes. And fall is a wonderful time to plan that. Maybe you're going to change up your pots for next year and you're like, okay, I'm going to add a pot of milkweed next year that is the host plant for the monarch butterfly, or I'm going to add a couple of pots or a landscaping bed or a raised bed garden for some native Ohio flowers, and then keep these extra things, the mums, the begonias, the petunias, or whatever. See where you can add those things in. Maybe it's along your sidewalk. Maybe it's, like I said, maybe it's just in some pots, but fall is a great time, and I do need to add, again, in case this is the first time you're listening to anything like this, that if you are going to add a landscaping bed, fall is a great time, a landscaping bed full of flowers. Fall is a great time to do that, and it is the ideal time to plant things by seed or bulb. Okay, you cannot get a perennial, which is a flower that comes back every year. You cannot plant that seed in the spring and typically have it come up. Okay, it won't grow. It needs what's called cold stratification, and all that means it needs to go through a cold, wet winter in order to grow for the following year. So fall is where it's at before the ground freezes. So anytime, I would say late September up until perhaps early November, whenever the last frost date is. I've been planting things well into the end of October before because we seem to be a little warmer than we used to be. So anyway, plan it now, and you will have a beautiful pollinator garden for next year. And when you go out next summer into your garden or on your porch or patio, you will see that what you have planted, if it is a native pollinator plant, you will see that it is alive instead of just sitting there looking pretty. Okay? Hopefully all this made sense. If you have any questions or an idea you would like to hear in a future episode, drop me a line in. As always, I thank you for listening.